The Cold War was not merely a standoff between two nations, it was an ideological conflict spanning continents. Fought with propaganda, proxy wars, espionage, and the ever-looming shadow of nuclear weapons, this era defined global tensions. By the late 1940s, two superpowers emerged from the ashes of World War II: the United States, championing liberal democracy and capitalism, and the Soviet Union, advancing communism under a centralized state. Mutual distrust ran deep. Washington feared communist expansion would consume Europe and Asia. Moscow believed capitalism aimed to strangle socialism before it could flourish. The world lived under what Winston Churchill called the Iron Curtain. But what if the Cold War had gone beyond deterrence and brinkmanship? What if it had escalated into something more? Throughout the Cold War, several crises nearly brought humanity to the brink of direct confrontation. The Berlin Blockade from 1948 to 1949 was one such moment. If US forces had attempted a ground breakthrough instead of relying on the Berlin airlift, Soviet troops might have fired the first shots in Europe. The Korean War from 1950 to 1953 presented another flashpoint. Had General Douglas MacArthur been given authority to strike Chinese or even Soviet territory with nuclear weapons, escalation would have been almost inevitable. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was the closest moment of all. A single miscalculation during the US naval blockade, or if a Soviet submarine commander had launched a nuclear torpedo under pressure, World War III could have begun. Each of these moments was a tightrope walk over the abyss. But let us imagine one of them went differently. Suppose October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis spiraled out of control. A US reconnaissance plane is shot down over Cuba. President Kennedy authorizes retaliatory strikes on missile sites. Soviet troops fire back. Suddenly, both superpowers are engaged in direct combat. The Soviet leadership, unwilling to appear weak, orders a nuclear strike on NATO bases in Western Europe. In turn, the United States launches strikes on Soviet positions in Eastern Europe. Within hours, the delicate balance of mutually assured destruction collapses into open nuclear exchange. The immediate consequences would have been catastrophic. Analysts from the era estimated that a full-scale US-Soviet nuclear exchange in the 1960s could have caused 100 to 200 million deaths in the first days alone. Cities like Moscow, Leningrad, Washington, New York, and London would have been annihilated. But the devastation would not stop there. Radioactive fallout would contaminate soil and water, spreading across entire continents. Agriculture would collapse. What we today call nuclear winter, a drastic cooling of the Earth due to soot in the atmosphere, might have triggered widespread famine. This would lead to widespread famine, a grim reality for survivors. Other nations would not have remained untouched. China, still on uneasy terms with both the USSR and the US, might have seized the opportunity to assert dominance in Asia. Europe, caught between the two superpowers, would likely become the primary battlefield. Non-aligned nations, India, Egypt, Yugoslavia, would face a difficult choice: remain neutral or align with whichever superpower emerged from the ashes. The global order would fracture beyond recognition, forever altering the course of human history. Not every scenario required immediate nuclear exchange. Another plausible escalation: the US or USSR deciding to intervene directly in proxy wars. Imagine Vietnam with American nuclear strikes on Hanoi, or Soviet tank divisions rolling openly into the Middle East during the Yom Kippur War. Each of these could have escalated regional conflicts into global ones. In such scenarios, nuclear weapons might have been used in limited ways, tactical strikes on battlefields rather than cities. But as most historians agree, once nuclear weapons are used, the likelihood of restraint rapidly collapses. If the Cold War had erupted into nuclear Armageddon, the survivors would inherit a ruined planet. The 20th century's dreams of space exploration, globalization, and technological revolution might have ended in rubble. Instead of the internet age, we might live in fractured, warlord-run states, scavenging in a world where industrial capacity and international cooperation were destroyed. The ideological battle between communism and capitalism would become meaningless in the face of survival. Humanity would be set back not just decades, but perhaps centuries. And yet, this catastrophe never unfolded. Why? Partly because of luck, but also because of restraint. Leaders like Kennedy and Khrushchev understood the stakes. Later, treaties such as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, 1968, SALT agreements, and back-channel diplomacy helped manage the rivalry. The policy of mutually assured destruction, as chilling as it sounds, paradoxically kept the peace. Both sides knew that in a nuclear war, there would be no winners, only survivors in a devastated world. This what if is not just a thought experiment about history. Today, new nuclear states, shifting alliances, and rising tensions echo parts of the Cold War era. The lesson remains clear: deterrence works, but it is fragile. Communication, diplomacy, and restraint are the thin lines separating civilization from catastrophe. The Cold War could easily have turned hot. Humanity narrowly avoided nuclear Armageddon multiple times. By exploring what might have been, we gain a deeper appreciation for the delicate balance that preserved peace, however uneasy it was. History is not just what happened, but also what did not happen. And in this case, what did not happen may be the most important story of all.